Hey everybody, it's Ben here. Just wanted to take a minute here to talk to y'all about the end of Barn Owl Station. I am finishing up my playthrough with this version of the game and this set of mods. I've kind of done everything I kind of wanted to do with Barn Owl Station. I definitely could go further. In fact, I was working on getting some more defenses built up to try and build the final set of spaceships to get us off world, but I just found myself not really. I felt like I'd done really everything that I wanted to do, and the stuff that I was working on just didn't really pan out. So I figured it'd be a good time to stop, quit while I'm ahead, and move on to my next fun project that I'm looking forward to, which is playing in RimWorld 1.3 with the ideology mod. But before I do, I wanted to go over kind of a last look at the colony, talk about where we've been, what's happened in the colony, and how everyone has done, um, and kind of go over some of the mods that I've had fun playing around with in this series, and to give sort of my opinion on some of the mods here, that so that you guys will know, if you wanted to add some of these into your own playthrough, what you might be interested in. So let's go do a quick look back over the colony and make sure we've got updates on everything. Most of the colony looks pretty similar to the way we left it last time I uploaded the video. Biggest thing is I've actually added these small decals to show what each of them are. So we've got the mess hall, the bay for animals, which we finally finished up here, and put in a whole bunch of these light leather animal beds. We used up a bunch of our leather from skinning lots of animals up here. We also worked on creating a bigger rec room. We had a TV that was being installed, as well as a nice large rug. We went ahead and replaced all the chairs with these plain leather armchairs to give everyone a nice comfort. And I've been messing around with this decor mod, which is a really nice one. I think it's from Vanilla Decor Objects. Props and decor, here it is. So these are all different objects that you can add into the game. So if you click on these, you can pull up different styles of cupboards or different styles of objects, and the research for them is actually dependent on like what you're making. So like for instance, down here I unlocked the farm props, and then I think there's other ones for kitchen props, power props, vehicle props, so on and so forth. And these are relatively cheap to unlock, and they really do give you a nice feeling of um, making these nice little additions where they don't actually add anything. Uh, they don't provide any use to the colonists, but they do make things feel a little bit more homely, and they are pretty cheap to make. I think each of these cupboards was like less than, see what steel cover with plates, I think it was. So this was one of these, and it was like 10 steel, so pretty cheap. And especially if you're a higher end colony where steel isn't a problem or as much of a problem, it's definitely something to think about adding in just for comfort's sake. We still kept the same three plain leather bedrolls in here just in case. I always find that funny since we started this off as the original bedroom. We've got each of these has a nice little dinner set on it. We didn't end up using anything with the soda fountain, although we did end up actually making some soda syrup, I think. Yeah, here we go, some soda syrup in here just as a test. But I was hoping maybe in another mod I'll work on this more. We did make a beautiful kitchen slash game room here. So we have, this is kind of Anton's space. Anton and his sons have been working hard on cooking. We upgraded their fridges to a double fridge for both the wall here that stores all the meat, and then this one which stores a lot of corn and veggies. We also included in some new cooking tools to help speed up work factor. We got a sweets table installed so that way we could build some candies. We didn't actually end up making any of these, but it was something that we were looking into. We got a bunch of arcade machines installed. These are actually nice recreation pieces for people to come in and play, just to kind of help keep morale up around the colony. We also have a beautiful bone style upright piano with a chair. We have a couple of soda tables here. This is where we actually made our simple syrup. And there are lots of different sodas that you can make using the different fruits from. This is, I think, VGP, yeah, garden drinks, which is a very cool mod. Definitely recommend working into that one. Of course, we have the billiards table and the roulette table, both of which are, this one's actually an art piece as well, made by Mackie, about a cow's freedom, apparently. A cow getting hypothermia. um, we also made a nice bar setup here. We were working on making some whiskey and then finishing up making some mash for vodka. Um, and each of these take a little bit of time to do, but you can actually make different alcohols with it. I think we should have, yeah, we've got about 15 bottles of vodka back here, maybe more, um, and about 30 bottles of vodka back here, as well as a whole bunch of animal corpses. We also have a couple of brewery stations and bars where you can make cocktails, energy drinks, whiskeys, mash, things like that. This is from Vanilla Brewing Expanded, great little mod, and it mashes with a lot of the vanilla textures and vanilla setups, so you don't have to worry about it really breaking your game. This one is from Vegetable Garden as well, so that way you can make things like teas, energy drinks, stuff like that. Um, so that's nice. We also have a little bit of an electric oven over here, so we can make things like bread, pizzas. We were looking at baking pies. We had, I think we were growing, what was it? Cloudberry. Here it was cloudberry plants. They're getting eaten up pretty quickly by our animals, since we have so many of them. And so I had it set up so that if we had some extra that wasn't eaten by animals, we could turn it into some pies over here. And then we have our food prep table where we were grinding some of our grains into flour. You can also use it to make lots of cheese, make milk from actually soybeans, which is kind of cool. You can salt some meats, make vegan substitutes, pickles, all sorts of cool little food options. Foods are really, really plentiful around here. And then for the espresso machine, we actually finished making coffee and then making tea as well. I had to suspend the coffee one specifically because the way I had it set up here was you can actually set it up to do the current task until you have X number, and then unpause when you're at a lower number. And I have that set for a lot of my bills. So for example, this compost starter, I had it set to pause at 500 and then unpause at 0. So when we ran out, it would unpause. And then you can always go in and pause it or suspend it as need be. The problem is with doing it for this one is coffee actually will freeze over time. So we don't have any that isn't, but if you leave it in a fridge, it actually turns into iced coffee, which is kind of neat. Which is why a lot of the recipes in here call for coffee or iced coffee. So if you want to make iced coffee, you literally just put it in a fridge and it will just turn into the item iced coffee, which is kind of neat. So we got a lot of iced coffee in here. We also have a lot of tea, and then we make this stuff called Young Young. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right at all, but it's a mixture of coffee and tea. And so I wanted to combine both of those and try and see whether that would boost colony happiness by doing some of that stuff. Aside from that, we finished expanding a bunch of our plant areas. So we were now growing sugarcane to get some sugar for sodas, some extra potatoes since our animals were growing so much. We got some tea grass, some heel root, an extra rice for animals, cloudberries, and then we have our resource plants, silver, steel, and plasteel, and then some cotton, corn, and of course potatoes. We I'm pretty sure this is the same. We installed the statue of Mackie, although it looks like he has changed a little bit. I had to. Uh, I'm running this still off 1.2 with as many of the mods in it that I could, but the problem is that I actually had to go back. I was working on installing everything for the next game that I want to play, and in doing so, some of the things got uninstalled. So when I came back to do this final episode for this world, some of the stuff got messed around with, so things might look a little bit different to when I was actually playing, but it's all like 99.9% there. Nothing major has been lost, just a couple of small things. We finished up with the bedrooms. We put in this nice blue carpet in each of the bedrooms, which I found from the More Floors mod. Under here, when you unlock it, you can actually choose what color carpet you want, and you can choose whether you want it to be like checkered, if you want to just be like a specific type, um, or I think this one here is from Garden Dyes as well, if you want to use that mod. But this one specifically was from the More Floors mod. And you can make it take either a lot and make it like a beautiful, rich royal look. That's from the Royalty DLC, or you can just have it take some just regular wool cloth, or any sort of cloth, and it will work just fine. Weird, I don't know actually where. Here we go, carpet. That's the one. So I just did blue carpet across all of these. So it was about 7 cloth each, which, seeing as how we're growing a bunch of this, is not that bad. I did end up installing a couple of these military turrets around the base, just as a way to prevent against if any raids spawned in and dropped down on us, we at least had some sort of defense. I also finished building this Riot Mechanoid charging station. I don't think it actually ended up finished building. Yeah, it looks like it hasn't finished building in this version of it, but um, I got a couple of research done to try and build these. These are like mechanoids that you can build from the expanded Vanilla Factions expanded mechanoids mod. I think that's what it is. Yeah, Vanilla Faction expanded mechanoids. I will say, one of the mods I'm going to talk about is this one. It is fantastic. I highly recommend it. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it. But I was working on building some extra defenses because building a ship as the last thing you can do here means that when the ship starts off, it actually sends out a message for 15 days to have raids come and attack you consistently. So you really have to build up defense pretty high in order to survive those. So I was working on building up defense for it before I decided I was just going to go play something different. Aside from that, we were working on building a hydroponics bay. So we've got a bunch of these here with these tillable hydroponics basins, and these are from Vanilla Furniture Expanded Farming. These are nice because you can actually make them either modular, or you can do them just as a singular piece here. So you can make them in a straight line, or you can get these ones and sort of build it out to whatever you need to. I'm playing on God mode right now because I was messing around with stuff, so no reason to keep that around. Anyway, we also had the prison. We built it out. We built out a very nice table with a lot of seating, so that prisoners were happy. We also built them beautiful masterwork level 5-finger fillet table, which is a recreation tool that they can play around with, where they kind of stab. You know that game you see in movies where you stab the knife between fingers, which I feel is pretty perfect. It does increase the chance of getting your fingers cut, but to be fair, that's on their own fault. I've also given them a darts board. Yes, I know, prisoners, darts, sharp objects. This is really a prison fit for Hopper and Grace. I mean, if they get cut, then that just means there's more work to be done, right? We also had a couple of these bonecrete and steel small bins in here to help keep things clean as we were going through. We haven't really expanded much in terms of power. Colonists in here is still the same. We did have to do a little bit of strip mining, which I didn't want to do, but I did want to make sure was taken care of so I can try and get some more components and so I can get some more steel because we were sorely lacking on steel. I also saw something that said if you hold down, oh, that is a thing. Okay, so if you click on a tile that you want to mine and you press equals sign, it designates the rest of the section of that ore to be mined. I don't. Okay, can't do it. You won't be able to do it on like slate, but specifically for ore tiles, apparently this is something that can be done. I'm not sure if that's modded, so you'd have to try it in your own game. But that was a little trick that I saw on one of the loading screens. Was said if you hit the equal sign button when you have one of the ore selected, it designates all of them in that vein chunk to be mined. I'm not sure if it's just the ones you can see, or if it's all of them overall, including the ones you can't see. But that was, I thought, pretty cool. Hospital hasn't really changed much. We still have our little back area here. We've expanded out. I'm not sure if I showed this last time, but we expanded out here to a full lab in order to work on cloning. We actually did, in fact, end up finishing cloning, and we also end up using some of the Tier 3 and Tier 4 bodies, which I'll show off here in a minute. And then we worked a little bit on gene pods and on incubators. But that ended up not working as well as we would have hoped. I also ended up making this back room, which was meant to be for mutagen and making a mutanite centrifuge. We actually have all the components needed for it, including specifically the morph silk, which was a really rare component we had to find. And we were hoping to get into reversion therapy for some of our colonists, but just didn't end up happening. It wasn't as prosperous as I was hoping it would be. Um, Other than that, everything else is pretty much the same. One thing I didn't mention last time is this supercomputer. Very cool object, very high end. It's again from Vanilla Factions Expanded Mechanoids. It is basically what it does is it's an item that you build using mechanoid components, and it will actually add one research point per hour to your current research task. So it basically helps in research in case you don't have someone who can do continuous research, which I did from Grace, or from Hopper rather. Um, but it's nice to be able to have that extra little bit of research added on there as well. And that is pretty much it. So, with that being said, let's go over some of our colonists and our final animal count. As you can see here, the Grace has called down to her ship body. Well, let's go over the colonists first, just so you can see everyone. Of course, we've got the initial four. We've got Hildy, Anton, Hopper, and Mackie. Each of them are doing fine. In terms of health, everyone seems to be doing okay. Um, yeah, everything's good. The biggest things that's changed, I think Hildy, she is not pregnant. Oh, she is pregnant, middle stage. So she's was going to have another kid. With still married to Anton, still fairly happy, I think. Let's see, social. Yeah, they're still happily married. So everything's good there. She is still really good friends with all of her sons, at least for most of them. We'll actually turn off debug mode here, just so that way I don't accidentally click and delete something. Probably the biggest thing that changed is Hopper. So Hopper, one of the research we were doing, actually down here, this is from the Android Tiers mod, which I'm going to get into here in a minute. Where is it here? Here we go. So with the Android Tiers mod, you can actually unlock different levels of androids. And specifically what we installed in him is a VX2 chip. It's a neural chip that allows its host to remotely control any series android, SX series android, which basically just means surrogate androids, or biological surrogates, and duplicate/permute their mind. So if you remember last time, we actually had a couple of prisoners that we had converted into biological surrogates here, and we were attempting to see if we could duplicate or permute our mind onto those and turn them into copies of colonists. Unfortunately, the way the mod works is those colonists that were converted actually had a different version of the chip in their head. Specifically, they had which one was it here? Was it this one? RX. There was one here that it had. It was not the VX1. I think it was the RX, or maybe it was something different. Anyway, I think it was this one. Anyway, basically what it allowed you to do is build a chip that you implant into into a human body in order to turn it into a remote host. However, if you want to make it one that you can duplicate yourself into, it has to be of the same level. So if you have a VX2 neural chip, you can duplicate or permute your mind into another body that also has a VX2 neural chip. You cannot permute or duplicate your mind into one that has a RX neural chip. So if you have a VX1 neural chip, it will still allow you to remotely control that host, but it won't let you duplicate the same level as VX2. If you have a VX3, which allows you to duplicate or control multiple at the same time, you're able to duplicate your mind into someone with a VX2. So the lowest you'll be able to do with a duplication or permutation of your mind is a VX2 neural chip. The problem with this isn't necessarily the VX2 chips. They're actually not terribly expensive to build. So the VXO actually was what we installed in our colonists that were prisoners here. And those are basically just some silver, some components, and some steel. Fairly cheap. VX2 does require plasteel and gold, as well as advanced components, which if you get advanced enough, you can make somewhat easily. Um, the highest the cost really is the components, because you have to have 24 per neural chip. But the problem with that is, I think we might still have one on here. Maybe we don't. Anyway, if you want to install those, you need either 8 Glitter World Medicine, which is a whole separate research and installation on its own. In fact, I think we've researched making Glitter World Medicine here, which takes ambrosia and nutramine, and as well as 2 regular medicines. So it is high to cost to make that glitter world medicine. That's if you want to do it in a human colonist. If you want to do it in one of your android colonists, you have to do it with. Oh, he hasn't actually made any anymore. There is a bill on here for advanced nano kits. These are basically the android equivalent of healing kits, and those cost silver, steel, and components. So to make 8 of those requires 16 components, which can be a lot, especially if you don't have like supreme fabrication or you're running out of steel. So it becomes really expensive to do even a single um, surgery on a robot in order to copy over. That being said, we did end up doing the surgery to install the VX2 neural chip inside of Hopper, and we also installed it in the tier level 4 body and created Grace. So Grace is actually a copy, one for one, of Hopper. They have the exact same traits, the exact same childhood and adulthood, but Hopper basically copied over the part of his of their neural pathways that contained Grace, and Grace became her own separate personality and obtained a body. In the lore of this playthrough, this allowed them to call down their old ship body as well as Anton's silver skip and fighter craft, and were able to have them land in order to allow the team to take off and fly wherever they needed to. So that's been the biggest change across those 4. Is that Hildy is currently on her 3rd child. Anton and them are currently married. Hopper has the VX2 chip installed, and Mackie is, Mackie. Although, Mackie did have Hopper and Grace team up to work on creating a clone for Mackie named Mackie Jr. And because Mackie doesn't remember his last name is changed here to Burnham instead of being Burnside. Um, so Mackie Jr. again is basically the exact same as Mackie. The only difference is originally when I created Mackie randomly, he came with a bunch of Silent abilities and was listed as like a Stellark. So he was really high in the royalty DLC with becoming a psychic. And I removed that. Unfortunately, because I messed around with some of the mods and didn't have everything reinstalled correctly when I went to play this map, it came back as and having some of these abilities. He just doesn't have the actual Psylink associated with it. But he is a clone. He did actually have a couple days worth of being upset at being a clone, just because he realized that there was someone else that looked exactly like him. But aside from that, he has all the exact same abilities. He has the childhood of Colony Vatgrown, but he has the same adulthood memories as Mackie. And he has all of the same traits and construction skills. And how I did that was I took the genome for Mackie, which I think is probably gone at this point because you use it up every time. Yeah, you take one of these genome sequence templates, like I have one here from a Yauta, and you basically input it into the clone vat. When the clone comes out, they are brand new. They have randomly generated stats, and the age on them is actually lower. So Mackie Jr. here is age 18 and 14 days. So they always come out age 18, and then they add on days, obviously, per each. Whereas Mackie, of course, is around 37 and 43 days. If you want to get their skills, you do have to have a brain scan of that person. So this brand scan here, this is from Questionable Ethics Enhanced, gave the clone the name of Mackie Burnside, and also changed his skills and passions to match what Mackie had. This is really useful. You can also do this off of corpses, so you can actually copy corpse scans onto humanoids as well. I believe you can also do this with animals. Um, it does change their brainwave patterns, so you can copy training over from one animal to another. Um, but it is very cool. So I used the cloning vat to do that. It was definitely a process, and it took a lot of maintaining to keep it working, but it did end up eventually working. Aside from that, let's start from the top again. So we've got our 4 colonists. We have KG, who is Anton's son, ended up being a really good shooter for the colonists. He was basically our hunter. We have Tethui, I just call him the Predator, who's been pretty good. He is a transhumanist, and we actually ended up getting him a bionic arm after his arm was shot off. I realized that one of his shoulders had been completely blown off, so we actually ended up giving him a bionic arm. And so he's very happy because he has at least a artificial part. Very much in the spirit of Anton wanting to outfit himself as well with bionic pieces in the show. Our Predator guy is very happy with that. We did, like I mentioned before, we did actually end up getting him some new gear with the machining table for the Predators. So he is now able to withstand in the cold and not get freaked out every single time he goes out in the cold. So he's basically got all that Yauta gear to keep himself cold, or to keep himself warm rather. We have Badaris, who is missing his helmet at the moment because of the mod changes, but he is doing well. He was basically he was basically one of our planters and helped out with random things around the colony. The biggest thing about him is he's clumsy, so every once in a while I would just get a message popping up that says Bardaris has tripped on himself and like sprained an ankle or cut himself doing something, and he would have to go and get fixed up by Hopper. So he would basically go in there, sit in the hospital for a few minutes until he healed up, and Hopper would either have enough time to go tend to him or he would just heal on his own, and it was pretty funny. We have Stench, which is Anton and Hildy's second son. He is actually was magically gifted. We ended up turning him into a plague doctor. This is part of the Rim world of magic that we'll talk about here in a minute. He is really good at planting, and we actually ended up trying to get him to work more on his shooting skills. But he was just good overall worker around the colony. Worked on some intellectual stuff, researching with Hopper, but was mostly just a hauler and was helping out around the place. We have Yoshida, which is Anton and Hildy's third child. So actually, I guess Hildy's pregnant with the fourth kid now. The brand new child of the colony. He's only been around for about a year or so. He's coming up on his first birthday. Um, and he's actually physically adept. We never ended up doing anything with that, and a psychopath, which is kind of weird. So he was brand new. We kind of just let him do his own thing. He's also got the same mutations that both Stench and his mom do, mostly Foxmorph, no Boomomorph in them. Whereas Stench is a little more Boomomorph. He's a little bit more Foxmorph. And we have him currently outfitted with a beautiful .223 carbine from the Brotherhood Compendium from Fallout. So that's all of were our first 2 colonists that joined, as well as KG, Stench, and Yoshida. We have our 4 android colonists. We had 3 of these android colonists here, but Osborne, unfortunately, got a really bad injury and got his legs blown off, or his basically stabilizers, since he flies around, and had to be put down because he was not able to be repaired. So we lost him, unfortunately. We have Derbyshire and Perkins. There are haulers. These guys are really nice because all 4 of these are from the Fallout race, robot race mod. Fallout races, the robots pack. And they actually don't eat food, which is really nice, but they are limited in what they can do. So, for example, these guys are our haulers, and Perkins and Derbyshire. And they basically run around and haul stuff. They are always simple-minded, so they're always incredibly happy. They don't really have any emotions to speak of, so they consistently keep getting these inspirations from being super happy. But they're very simple-minded and really just run around and pick up stuff, so nothing really to worry about there. Cameron is one of our Protectrons. He basically goes around and does a whole bunch of random work around the colony, mostly to do with planting. And then he is also simple-minded, so he'll go around and do a lot of hauling for the colonists and things like that. And then we have Strick, who's our newest Securitron that we actually built just recently. He has been going around. He has even less that he can really do, but he is really good at shooting, and he has some powerful mounted machine guns and mounted Gatling laser guns. So aside from a sentry bot, which is like the highest level you can build, this is basically the second best, and is a pretty good shooting colonist, so we're pretty happy to have him around. We also had Angelus, who's one of our original, like three basically conscripted members, not counting children that were born, who unfortunately passed away. She was killed in a raid, I think by alien. Yeah, I think by aliens, um, like the xenomorphs. Or no, actually, what it was we had to. She got so low mood because of something that happened that we actually had to put her down. That was right. It was right after the aliens attacked, and in trying to like calm her down, she ended up taking too much damage and dying. So we had to bury her. Or I think she actually got cremated and turned into fertilizer for the colony. No body left to waste. After that, we've got a bunch of our new colonists here. So we've got Luke, who was a conscript, who was a crashed, I think he was a crashed robot, and we actually ended up bringing him into the colony. He's pretty good, mostly shooting in melee. He's a tech level 1 that we created. Maybe? Yeah, he was a tech level 1. I don't think we actually built him. I think he was just a... Well, maybe, I don't remember. Oh no, he's tech level 3. Yeah, so he may have been a tech level 1 that we actually migrated over into a tech level 3. I can't remember. It's been a while. But we had 2 tech level 3 bodies. And I think we actually copied over from a tech level 1 into a tech level 3 body to see what would happen. So he actually, I think, also has... Does he have... Maybe he doesn't. Oh, yeah. So you can, with these, you can actually have them connect to SkyMind and upload their mind into a new body. So if you connect their mind to SkyMind and then you connect the mind of the body to SkyMind, you can actually upload directly into. So if I click here, it shows T3. That's this body up here. You can actually upload them directly into it, which kills off the host body and kills the mind in the body you're transferring into, and basically turns it into a dead husk, which obviously is not as good as copying like we did with Hopper and Grace. So that's how that system works. So that was what we did. We had a tier 1 colonist, I think we either created or recruited, and we copied him over to the tier 3 body to give him a little extra gear. I think we also re-rolled his stats, and he ended up being disliking children, misandrist, and tough, which is interesting for sure. We have McFly, which was our sheep colonist that we ended up reverting using our 1 reversion serum, just because he is a... Weirdly, I think he's a pawn morpher incident that comes up. He's like a... I've had him come up in a prior game where it's like, oh, I'm a celebrity chef. If you turn me back into a human, I'll be great. He still has the mutation of mostly being a sheep morph, and he is happy because there's more morphs in his colony. But he's still a pretty good guy. He's mostly been a hunter and has been working with the animals a lot to try and help keep them tame. He also does a lot of cooking and a little bit of construction work as well. We have, of course, Mackie Jr. and Grace, both of whom are copies of our former colonists, and they've been working on gaining some of their skills up through the Realm of Magic mod. We have Orange, who was actually, I think we actually installed a spine on him, if I remember correctly. He was a colonist that we recruited after he attacked our colony with a bunch of his friends, and he and 2 other colonists were captured and healed. Orange was the one that we did have to grow a spine in our organics vat and install into him, and originally we were going to install it and let him go, but he decided after talking with us that he wanted to stick around and had like an immediate recruitment. So because he had such a high construction level and a fairly high shooting in melee with no incapables, I did want to keep him around. And plus he's a giant elephant dude, which is always cool. So we kept him around for that. Cassandra and Hannah, along with one other guy who actually left our colony. I think we actually sold him into slavery because he had a mental breakdown and we had to put him in prison, named Morrow, who's a hobbit. Morrow, Cassandra, and Hannah were three of our colonists that were from the latest space battle crash, which happened kind of over here in the corner. A bunch of pods and spaceship parts crashed down over the course of a day, and there were three colonists that were able to be rescued. Cassandra and Hannah are the two that stuck around. Cassandra was another one that was magically gifted, and we actually ended up converting her into a bombardier, which is a fighter that specializes in long-range explosive weaponry, which is kind of cool. She has a bunch of these explosives she can actually toss around, and they do damage to structures and people. Um, she's been really good as an intellectual and has been helping out Hopper with doing a bunch of the last minute research to try and finish up some of our tech trees and get us a little bit closer to leaving the world here. And then Hannah is our last one here. She has been our fighter. We have tried to maximize on her melee, and she's also been really good with animals because she's, of course, a tamer. So she's been helping us tame a lot of the animals around the map as well. So those are our colonists, and as for our animals, we have quite a few. Ignoring some of our human colonists that are, so we have Kamba, we have Sir Elk, and there's another one in here, Boyer Porcupine. Those three are our colonists up here that are actually sentient, and that we locked in here to try before, so we could try and do more research on turning them back into humans. Every other animal here is non-sentient. We have a couple of muffalos who are still sleeping up here, so about 4 muffalos overall, mostly male, but some female. We have our, of course, chemical processing units, which are our mechanical chickens that we built up. We have a bunch of ibex rams. We had one that tamed randomly, and because they're mountable, and they just have a couple of small training bits to um, turn into like attack animals, and our colonists are basically using them as mounts. We thought it was good to tame these. Same with the wild boars. We had one randomly tamed, and we decided to tame the rest in order to use them as mounts around the colony. So we have quite a few of those. And we have two sort of random animals. One was a raccoon that self-tamed, and the other one was an ankylosaurus. I just wanted to see if we could even tame these guys, and they are, of course, huge walking tanks with pretty high melee DPS, and really high armor, so they'd be good for taming, and I figured we could also use them to try and see if we could splice any genes off of them and do some stuff with gene recombining. Aside from that, we also, I forgot to mention, we have this beautiful Barn Owl Station decal sign with each of the letters spelling out Barn Owl Station, which I'm really happy with. Overall, the colony looks pretty good. We ended up installing some extra defenses down up here. We exchanged all of our smaller um, standard like steel metal military turrets with these larger ones to help stop raids, and actually ended up working pretty well to help stop some of the raids coming in that were kind of crazy. We worked on finishing up with these advanced geothermal power generators and built some extensions so that will actually work with our regular colony power system. And we're working on getting some more steel from this underground area over here. We had a lot of scanned nodes of steel we were working on gathering to try and help boost our steel amounts. Let's see what else. I think that's pretty much it in terms of stuff that has happened and big noticing, big glaring things. So I want to go over a couple of the mods that I've played around with on here real quick and just give a couple of recommendations as to things that were fun to play around with and stuff that didn't really work out. So Android tiers, which is actually what allowed us to create Hopper and Grace. Really cool. I gotta say, honestly, having played with Android colonists from the start and also recruiting Android colonists, you do have a sort of separate tech tree that you have to go down for them. And as I saw in the very beginning, it can be difficult to kind of get them started because you do have to get into spacer level research in order to even just get basic replacement parts. So if your colonist loses an arm, you can build basic, like a regular human colonist, if they lose an arm, you can build basic, um, like installable parts, like wooden arms or things like that, which have really poor efficiency, but you're at least able to install something for them. With these guys, you're really only able to do operations if you actually have the parts for it. So because I have the installation, I'm able to make makeshift replacement parts. If I actually have these ones are just like basically the equivalent of basic prosthetics. They don't have anything special to them. And as you can see, I've actually installed two here from when Hopper lost his arms, and it only gives him 95% efficiency. If I make some extra better prosthetics from the prosthetics table, Android parts workbench, I think that's it here. I can actually, oh no, it was this one. Yeah, here it is, the prosthetics table. I'm actually able to make, is that implants? It must be this parts workbench, I just didn't see it. Here it is. So I can actually make high-powered arms and high-powered legs to replace them with better arms and legs. But there isn't really there's also basic arm and leg replacement as well. If I wanted to replace the arms that he has with his arms that would have 100% efficiency. I just never got around to replacing them. So you have to actually do extra research that's in the spacer level in order to even get replacement prosthetics that are less good than the original prosthetic pieces. So it becomes more difficult to take care of Android colonists. The good thing about them is you can actually have them you either use their internal battery, which means that they need to recharge from either a power station like this one here, which is a tier of research you can do, or from a pod, which again is another tier of research you can do. Um, that can be built by our colonists, or you can have them turn this off and they will actually use a biomass generator. And what that means is that they'll basically go around and eat like regular colonists and use food substance in order to charge up their internal battery. So once you get high enough, you can actually just forbid them from using food whatsoever and just have them charge based off that charge system. And because they don't sleep, they don't have like a sleep bar or rest bar like other humanoid colonists, it means they can work through the night. So you basically have colonists that can work either opposite schedules or the same schedule as the rest of your colonists and really only need to go eat. They don't need to stop and spend most of their night sleeping, which is of course really useful, but the downside to it is you do have to work on higher research in order to replace pieces for them. In terms of upgrading them, you can absolutely move up in tiers for bodies, but really all that does is it replaces what their body is made out of and how quickly they're able to move. Because each of the bodies will have different stats as to how quickly they can move and how efficient they are. Um, it's only if you wanted to get into the high level of like copying colonists or installing stuff like the Skymind core, where you can like have humanoid colonists take over like like 6 tier 1 bodies and like send them out into battle. Um, the mod basically allows you to either create full android colonists or create android surrogates where your humanoid colonists can actually upload their bodies or upload their minds to this Skymind and actually download them temporarily into a body to control. So, for instance, if Mackie wanted to download his mind into a surrogate tier 1 body or to a surrogate humanoid body from a colonist that we've turned him into, if that surrogate body died, Mackie would still be alive, and his brain would just instantly go back into his own body, and he'd be fine. So there's no loss risk in terms of the actual colonists themselves. It does take a little bit of setup to do, but it's definitely something that you can work with. The big drawback is with any body, of course, you have to keep it alive. So what I found was with the colonists that I put in as prisoners, because I wanted them to be colonists that I could swap, that I could basically duplicate my body into for any of my colonists, instead of just having it be one they control. Um, I found that instead of actually being useful, they were just a food source, or they were just like a food dump. We would just keep feeding them and feeding them and feeding them and feeding them and make sure they were taken care of, and they would sleep the whole time and whatnot. They never actually got to be used, even during raids, because I didn't want to risk installing the wrong chip in one of my colonists and then working on upgrading it later. So it is sort of a risk balance where you have to figure out whether you want to take on the responsibility of having that extra body to keep around and having to either charge it, like this one, where it's just consistently like pulling power about 380 watts and charging this internal like body that you're just not using, or if you're willing to have a humanoid colonist that you have turned into this biological surrogate. It does also come with a negative mood boost the first time you do it for everybody that you do. If you install this chip on a prisoner, um, you basically turn them into a humanoid surrogate colonist, and people will have a real negative mood buff unless they're psychopaths, similar to like butchering a colonist or butchering a prisoner. So that's something to keep in mind, is it does come with a negative debuff. So it's something you want to do sparingly if you're worried about that. Otherwise, if you're even considering adding androids in, I find it's really well balanced. It's really fun to play around with, and it's definitely worth checking out. At least in the if you're even considering adding in android colonists, because they are really pretty similar to humanoid colonists, but with some definite bonuses and a really cool system for allowing like duplication and like body sleeves and all sorts of stuff that you would find in like a transhumanist style campaign. Fits really well with the RimWorld experience overall. Um, let's talk about the Alien versus Predator one. Uh, I really like the fact that the Predators are colonists that you can recruit, as well as colonists you can face off against, because uh, in terms of factions, they're ones that are initially very against you. I was very lucky to get him as a colonist because Anton had a inspiration to instantly recruit the next colonist that he worked on. So having him in my colony was very cool. It is very interesting that the research requires them to be the sole person researching the project in order to go forward on it, which means that if you wanted to play a series of predator colonists, which I think is actually one of the scenarios you can build when you start off the game, it means that they are the only ones that can do that research, just because it's too alien, for lack of a better term, to any other colonist type. It does mean that if you are in a situation like I am, your one colonist has to be the one to research it, which means that I had to actually force him, even though I got real lucky and he does have a interest in learning intellectual, I actually had to force him to actually study one of my intellectual books, which is somewhere around here. Maybe I sold it, I don't know. Um, and like I had to force him to read those books and study them in order to get his intellectual up enough high enough that he was able to even do the like 400 point research of initial tech for his armor. So basic tech here was 800 research, and this just allows you to build the machining table and get the vest, the hunter greaves, and the hunter chestplate. And the reason I needed that to be done is because they actually can't wear other armor other than their Yauta gear. They can wear some like small things, like for example, they can wear the outer. Let's see, what do we have here? The tribal. Actually, they can't even wear the outer stuff, so they can only wear like pants, I guess, that aren't from their specific race, but everything else has to be specific to the Yauta. So that's the outer is the tribal cloak. You have the armor of the chest plate and the greaves, the vest, which is to keep themselves warm, and then the biomask basically allows them to have protection. And I was lucky that he already came with a biomask. He already came with a survival like mesh, but it didn't help keep him warm. So I had to do research on it for him to be even able to survive in this boreal forest. So unless you're living in like a warm climate, they're not going to be very happy, and you're going to have to do that basic research in order to get them around. In terms of the aliens, they're terrifying. Um, Obviously, this was a nest we never really got around to defeating. We defeated most of the drones, but I did not fuck around with this shit. Um, Specifically because if I did, each of these comes with a face hugger inside of it. Some of them are mutated, some of them are just regular, and then this thing, which is the xenomorph tunnel, spawns a xenomorph queen. Even as babies, these things are hard to kill. They can come into the map unexpectedly, and they can implant themselves in animals or colonists, and you won't even know until they've already sprung out and they're coming to attack you. Um, the really cool thing, and that came from this little event up here where we had that ship land, is that that ship emitted sort of this zone of purple gas, which you can still see kind of here. Um, and that purple sort of fog caused these unnatural, strange fungus to grow. If you've seen the movie Prometheus, you know what I'm talking about. These spore packs, uh, like facehuggers, release spores that implant themselves into your body and then burst out into chest huggers or into face huggers or chest bursters, whatever. They basically turn themselves into alien xenomorphs, and they're called neomorphs. So what ended up kept happening is that these funguses would grow. I have to run out and chop them down, and then eventually some of these animals would just burst open their chests, and little neomorphs would spawn out of there. And then if I didn't take care of it right away and go out and hunt them, they won't actually come after you until they get old enough to where they can survive a hell of a lot of pain, and they will actually come out and destroy you. Like, they will just continue to attack your colony or your animals or whatever animals are around the map until they get fed, and they are hungry motherfuckers. Same, and the also terrifying thing is that these xenomorphs, when you lose track of them, they go invisible. Not just like, oh, they're like, you can still see them shimmering on the map. No, I mean straight up, like, you can't fucking select them. Automated turrets will not fire on them until they're within attacking range of a colonist, and facehuggers almost immediately begin to impregnate on any colonist that they attack, which means that unlike insectoids or mechanoids where you can attack them from afar and not have to worry about them getting too close, or if they do get too close, you just attack them in melee, these guys, if you attack fucking facehuggers and they attack you in melee, they will down your colonists almost instantly and begin to impregnate them, meaning even if you get the thing off, it's still going to spawn another xenomorph bursting out of their chest. So they are just as terrifying as they are in the movies, and don't fuck around with them. That being said, absolutely love the mod. Uh, Definitely would play with it on another playthrough that's more sciencey and like high tech. But my next mod's going to be more medieval, or my next playthrough is going to be a little bit more medieval, so I'm not really going to worry about that. I'm going to leave it out for the next one. Fallout races, these little robots. Um, Very cool, very nice if you're a big fan of the Fallout series. They are created on the prosthetics table, or the machining table rather. They are really easy to make at the beginning. They require plasteel, steel, and components, and require a little bit of research. Let's see, I think there was in the tech tree here for, should be down here near the bottom. I'm using Research Pal, by the way, in case anybody is wondering, and that's why all of these look so different. Here we are. There's Mr. Handy, scrapbot units. So the original scrapbot units, they do require like they do require electronics to be built up first, as well as I think simple prosthetics. But scrapbot units are only about 800. And then to go into Mr. Handy units and Protectron units are about another 800 each, so not that bad. Um, it's about 800 for each of these, or maybe 1,000 depending on where you're at. Securitrons and Assaultrons and Sentry bots are a little higher at around 1,600 and 2,000. So it does become more expensive the more you research into it. Um, and they do become a lot more expensive in terms of what they take to create. Obviously, taking 16 components, 10 advanced components, and almost 300 or 225 of this plasteel is a lot. Um, and it does take a lot of work for each of these to be done as well, because even if we just take a look here, it takes almost 11,000 work in order to create one of these. So it can take a long time for some of this to be done. But if you have the ability to make them, they are great colonists. They don't require food. They don't require sleep, and they are somewhat balanced because while they do take a lot to make, um, they really can only do those specific functions. So they're not like building a whole other colonist that can do everything and anything. Even the Protectron, which I think is probably the most um, all around useful. Same with Mr. Handy's. They really only can do basic stuff. They can't do any medical, they can't do any artistic, and the stuff they do like focus on, they're really low skill at, and they take a long time to build up. They don't really have many passions or um, anything like that. So they are useful to a point, and they're definitely a boost to your colony, but they don't replace your colonists, if that makes sense. So if you're into the Fallout universe and you like them, definitely would worth checking out and at least seeing if you like. And the Fallout races and Fallout pack is pretty cool. The Brotherhood Compendium, things like that, add a lot of pretty cool overall um, Fallout stuff to your game, which if you're into that, like I am, is kind of cool. And specifically, the thing that I like too is with the Brotherhood Compendium, you actually cannot research Brotherhood gear and Enclave gear without having the prerequisite. Um, it requires the Brotherhood mainframe, which is actually a thing you either have to steal or have given to you at the start of a scenario where you're playing as Brotherhood. So you have to go and steal it from the Brotherhood in order to even gain access to making some of these experimental projects like Power Armor, Forbidden Archives, um, stuff like that. Same with the Enclave, you have to have the presidential mainframe in order to do any research on them. But they still have some basic stuff that you can do once you get the Brotherhood mainframe. So you can start off as a pretty good faction with them and still have the same level of research as everyone else, but have specific research if you have those mainframes, which you can steal as a regular faction, or if you're starting as Brotherhood, you get it automatically. Let's see what else. Rim Genetics and the Pawn Morpher. I was honestly not super impressed with Rim Genetics. I tried a lot to get into it. I made almost all of the machines that I could, worked on incubators, grabbed a whole bunch of bodies, and these stupid fucking incubators are so testy. You have to basically build a whole separate room that is temperatured exactly to where they need to be. It needs to be, I think, between 0 and 50 in order for it to work. Let's say. Think the okay, it doesn't say it on here, but yeah, basically what I saw was it had to be between 0 and 50 degrees Celsius, and I thought I put it in the right place, and either kept freezing or it just kept saying failed due to ruined by temperature, and just kept fucking up. Similar to like eggs, how you have to keep them at a certain temperature, like they just keep screwing up. So I just gave up on it. I got to the point here where like I'm really well set. I've got a lot of colonists. I've got a lot of animals. I'm trying to make cool genetic creatures to like add to my animals or replace them, and it's just the vanilla animals are still fine. Like I'm just mostly using them as mounts or as like pack animals or making specific items for my colonists to break down like these chemical capsules. So there really wasn't any need for me to get into this. It was more just experimentation, and it was just more trouble than it was worth. In terms of Pawn Morpher, honestly, unless you start out with the mechanite material nearby you, which is the main ore that the mod adds in order to simulate the ability to like to morph creatures, there really isn't a good way to limit how much your pawns morph. So what happened with Hildy and with her descendants, basically, as well as I think Angelus had a morph as well, was I tried. I don't have any mutinite, that ore that causes pawns to morph or cause you to be able to do research into pawn morpher. I didn't have any of it on the map. Couldn't buy it anywhere. I searched through every trader that came by. I was like on the hunt for mechanite. Couldn't find it. I got one mechanite slurry which is somewhere in here. This is the only mechanite slurry I've ever gotten, and it was actually dropped by a colonist when they crash landed. I didn't even buy it off someone. And that is like not even enough to, that is barely enough to get started making mutanite, because you can actually make it from mechanite slurry. The only other way to get mechanite slurry is from taking already existing morphs. You have to have cow morph and shook morph, cow morph milk and shook morph eggs. Or you can make it from KO bulbs or from mutanite. So I didn't have mutanite. I didn't have these items, so I looked into doing KO morph or KO bulb, which are a plant that you can grow. So if we go into the building area, it is actually a plant here. Somewhere out here, nutrient flower. Where's KO? I'm not seeing it in here, but I know it is in here. Anyway, KO bulbs were a thing you can actually grow. And I went looking into growing it thinking, okay, I'll grow it. It shouldn't have any like problem. And then the moment I start growing it and harvesting it, my colonists start mutating, obviously because it's a mutagenic plant. I didn't think about that. So I said, okay, well, that sucks. I have to look into reverting these other colonists anyway because I want to make use of them and actually have them have limbs to use instead of hooves and things. So I have to look into that for Hildy, and hopefully she doesn't turn into a full animal. Well, I looked into trying to find anything in the research tab, and maybe this is just me not being able to find anything, but I didn't see anything that would allow you to, like, protect yourself against mutation, and I'm not sure if it works the same against radiation. So there are things you can get to protect you against radiation, but I don't know if it's the same as mutagen. And I looked online, I didn't see anything about it that I could find as to whether it would protect you the same way. So I researched into hazmat suits, and they ended up being super expensive. Let's see if I can find where it's at. Hazmat suits on here. Yeah, making hazmat suits requires 100 of, I think it's like cloth or any sort of, yeah, wool substance, which at that point I didn't have a whole lot of cloth to make. And then it requires a bunch of steel and components. And that's just for the suit, and then making the hazmat hood has similar requirements. So as of right now, probably could actually make it, wouldn't be that bad, but I didn't know if that would even work. So by the time I got to this stage where I'm already late game, I'm like 3 or 4 years in, I'm just getting to the point where I can finally I have gathered up barely enough of this morph silk from traders and from people that have crashed in order to make this machine to maybe push through enough mutanite slurry to create mutanite so that maybe I can start making some of the reversion serum for some of my colonists. Maybe it, because I need at least 2 mutanite in order to do it. I need to at least get started by making something. It just becomes so difficult. So the only way that I can see to keep your colonists from really having an issue with it is to make sure that the people who are doing plant cutting are always, you're either always hooked up with hazmat suits or get another mod like locks, which allows you to select certain doors to only be able to be accessed by certain colonists or certain animals, and select it so that only colonists who are either wearing the hazmat suit or who can't get morphed like an android colonist, have them go in and do the work with this dangerous mutation and radiation. It's so complicated, and the amount of pawns that you'll come across that are like humanoid pawns out in the wild, or humanoid pawn, or they're animal pawns that have the sapience to actually be sentient, are so common that you're going to end up recruiting colonists that are just animals and you can't really do anything with, and they'll become moody and upset and go on binges and mental breaks because you can't take care of them the same way that you do human colonists. And in terms of using it as a weapon, unless you're, again, lucky enough to have mutanite on your map, which I was not, and I looked everywhere for it, you can't make use of any of the cool, like, mutagenic weaponry and, like, turn your colonists, or turn enemy prisoners or colonists into like weird animals or open gene banks or any of this cool stuff. So it has a lot of cool stuff to it, but I kept trying to get into it and kept feeling like I was being roadblocked by the lack of the specific ore that had not generated on my map, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I was even looking into getting into like long range scanning to try and see if there was anywhere on any other tiles on my world map to see if there was anything else that I could do. Oh, I seem to have broken it. Yep, I broke the world map. I totally screwed that up. Well, okay, aside from that, the only other mod I wanted to talk about, and I'll end this video since I broke the game here. Only other mod that I wanted to really talk about was specifically RimWorld of Magic. RimWorld of Magic is a very cool mod that I would definitely recommend getting into if you wanted to introduce magic into your game. Um, I would say it's really well balanced, even though it does have some craziness to it. Um, the big thing to know is that your colonists can either spawn as already having a magic ability, and there are cool research that you can get into it in order to up their magic ability or change them over into different mage classes or um, whatnot, or they can spawn as magically gifted or physically adept. Um, there's also a extra additional mod that expands off of that called Kurs. It's Kures, Kurs, a RimWorld of Magic expansion or class expansion or something like that. Anyway, I would highly recommend if you're even going to get into the RimWorld of Magic mod, installing that as well, because it adds more overall classes and expands some of the physically adept classes to be more overall useful. Um, so that's what added things like the medic class that Hopper is, or the technomancer that Hildy is, or the gadgeteer that Mackie was. Um, so it gives them abilities from some of the other classes and mixes them and matches them and flavors them to be more tech-based, which is kind of neat. But the really cool thing is, too, that if you get any of these colonists that are magically gifted or physically adept, you can actually train them from your other colonists to be either the same class or give them a Tauren manuscript and have them be randomly rolled as any other different class to make sure that they can try and become something different. That's what actually happened with our two colonists that were magically adept. One of them rolled into a plague doctor, which allowed him to do all sorts of terrible experiments under Hopper and Grace to colonists, and had some cool bonuses with like drawbacks. So they were able to do really fast surgery, but it had a chance of inflicting disease, or they were able to like induce more blood into colonists, but might give them a blood disorder. Or they were able to just straight up attack a colonist and cause them to lose a whole or an enemy and have them lose a whole bunch of blood randomly, or like really profusely lose a lot of blood. But you don't find that it's severely overpowered, especially if you're coming up against enemies who also have these magical abilities, which a lot of them can randomly roll up having magical abilities. In fact, the last raid that I had before I rolled back and finished and decided, you know what, I'm done here. I want to move on to the next game, was actually a raid from a Lich from that mod, which had insane health regen and an army of skeletons that were just way too much and overwhelmed pretty much all of my defenses. But again, it was balanced because I also had colonists that could like lob explosives through the mountain over the walls and like attack them from different angles. And if I had explored more of it, I might have gotten into artifacts that I could build for my colonists that would boost their magical ability, or training that could expand their abilities into different classes, things like that. So it's balanced in as much as magic is always a way to subvert the systems that are already in place. So when it comes to games like this or other role-playing games, um, You have the set of rules that are how the game is supposed to be run, and then you have magic users which are built to subvert them in unique and interesting ways. And if everyone has the power to subvert them, then the subversions become the new set of rules, which is what happened with uh, this Real World of Magic mod. If you don't want to include magic in your game, totally understandable. There's not really a way to specifically delegate it to only being like lore friendly, like tech or anything like that, so I would just stay away from it. But if you're okay like me with having um, some magic in your world, then I would definitely recommend at least checking it out. Yes, I want to load anyway. Um, Other than that, that is pretty much it. I'll leave you with one last look at Barn Owl Station after we load back in. You can see about how long it takes me to load into the game and the insane amount of mods and stuff that I have that make this take forever to load up. But I really appreciate everyone for being really supportive of me in playing and posting on this kind of stuff. It's not something I would typically do as like a let's play. I tried to do that with Stars of That Number, my Stars of That Number Room World series, and it just ended up being too much time um, invested into playing the game to record episodes and working on editing and things like that. And so just doing this as an update every once in a while, maybe once every week or 2 weeks, has been really nice and has allowed me to kind of play the game at my own place, mostly while I've been working during off time or while I'm waiting for stuff during my calls to take care of since I'm working from home now. It's allowed me to just sort of kind of relax and have something to do with my hands while I'm talking with customers about stuff that I have the same conversation 8,000 times. So again, I appreciate everyone for being really supportive, and I am very excited again to start the next series. It's going to be in 1.3. It's going to be specifically focusing on doing a medieval style playthrough. So I'm going to be moving up from knowing absolutely nothing in the tribal stage all the way up to industrial is going to be the highest level that we're going to see, and that's specifically just so we can get the disco balls and some of the stuff to actually have a party room be built and get like basic power generation. But aside from that, it's really not going to be much more. We're not going to get into space or tech or anything super crazy. Um, and then we're going to be focusing on the ideology expansion DLC, which basically allows you to have sort of a religion. And I've installed a couple of mods that will allow us to kind of play it as what the Disco Crew is, which is a bunch of crazy, um, uh, a bunch of crazy people who are running around, um, joking about being communists and drugs and hippies and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to be a bunch of kobolds and goblins and weird monstrous creatures who reject all forms of, conventional beauty and are just looking to get down, do some drugs, have a fun party, and make sure everyone is taken care of, communal health care, that kind of stuff. So it's gonna be fun. We're gonna have some fun with it. Gonna get into some mods I haven't tried before, and some mods that I've had installed in previous playthroughs but haven't ever really gotten into, um, and kind of see where it goes. So again, thank you all so much, and from everyone here at Barn Owl Station, keep being beautiful, you beautiful bastards, and I'll see you all later.